And hello, everybody. Welcome back for another episode. If not now, when? In today's show, I am so honored and excited to invite one of the coolest person I met, Deanna Brown, on the show with us today. Deanna, she is early stage investor, innovation specialist, and startup strategist. As a 35 years old digital and content visionary, Diana is recognized for delivering extraordinary growth and innovation for some of the world's most influential brands, such as Yahoo, AOL. Today, she is a managing partner for PMC Venture in a new venture fund based in Austin, Texas. She is really passionate about supporting diverse team and mission-driven founders. So with that, everybody, I am so beyond excited. Please join me to welcome Deanna to the show.
Thank you, Wen.
So let's jump in. Tell us how all the magic began for you.
Well, I think for me, life was very much just a series of questions and answers. As a kid, I was always very curious, and I always felt like if I didn't ask, I wouldn't know, and if I didn't know, I would be sort of left out. So this early days wanting to belong, which we all have that feeling, really led me on a journey that was about questions and answers, and being very sort of, in some cases, bold, but other cases just very genuine about wanting to understand why other people were successful, why brands were successful, why businesses were successful, and just that sense of belonging, that sense of connectivity. Cut to, I played a lot of team sports as well growing up.
What sports?
Basketball, volleyball, soccer, the like. And that teamwork was also a big part of my DNA and part of my, and again, the intent was to grow my relationships as a kid, and become a part of something, sort of bigger than myself. That has been also a repeated theme in my professional life. And
why is that important for you, Deanna?
Because I think that collaboration and teamwork is, in fact, a solution as well as an opportunity. I've yet to ever find a place or an environment or a business or even a collection of people where being collaborative, being team-oriented, being part of something bigger than yourself wasn't fantastic, wasn't exciting, wasn't dynamic. One of the things, to digress, one of the things I hear time and time again from entrepreneurs is how lonely it is, and how being a single founder is really challenging. And I understand that. I've been blessed to be part of great teams. And sometimes I'm the point guard and out front and sort of the leader, the captain. Other times I'm just a supporting player. But that belonging, that sense of collaboration, has just always been super important. And I think it's important to entrepreneurialism at large. But back to your earlier question, my story started as a kid being curious, looking at things as journeys as opposed to endpoints, and wanting a sense of belonging and collaboration. So out of university, I went to work for some really exciting and notable companies, the New York Times being one, Condé Nast being the second. And it was at Condé Nast where I got an opportunity to get into digital. And that was in 1994, which was very early. That was the days of the dial-up modems, and the pages would load like painfully slow, and you'd be watching this photograph or this image come up. And what I discovered very early on, especially working with many of the Condé Nast brands who were very much about the paper stock and the photography and the visual expression of those brands, I thought, this isn't going to translate. And it was the first time that I thought, we need to rethink that the format, as they know in the media business. We need to imagine, what is the value of a brand outside of paper stock and photography? And what was wonderful about the Newhouse organization or Condé Nast in general was they were very exploratory, and they welcomed the opportunity to create something new, like Epicurious, which was the first website, and call it Epicurious and build a community around recipes and food, to build forums and old-style, kind of engagement mechanisms, way pre-gamification and what have you. But just this idea that this brand, while it had these other brands anchoring it, Bon Appetit and Gourmet, it was really about that community. It was really about structured data, things that you would never worry about in a print environment. You had an opportunity to think about in a digital environment. So instead of just building a magazine website, we built a new brand from establishing brands, taking advantage of the medium, which was interactivity, which was connectiveness, right? So being connected in the food space back in 1994, 95 was the innovation. So that projected me into an orbit, which became quite fun, and a lot of work and a lot of exciting things where I would launch with founders, co-founders. I would launch businesses in journalism and media. I would launch things in product and technology. I moved from New York City to San Francisco for about 8 years. I had a period of time where I was back in New York working with another big series of brands, Scripps Networks, which was Food Network and HGTV and DIY Network and the likes. And each time trying to take a step back and saying, what's the essence of the opportunity in digital? Because at the time, and we're experiencing it now, we had Web 1, we had Web 2, now we're here in Web 3. Yay. Each time we had to take a step back and say, what's the brand, the product, the service, what is it about? And what does the technology enable it to do? And then bring me fast forward amongst all these wonderful startups with co-founders, venture funded, to big companies where they asked me to be an entrepreneur in a big company and sort of help express the business differently. I came about the likes of Mr. Jay Penske, who had a very, very venerable business in print media and digital media, but was just starting to invest in live event media. And that brings me to Austin, Texas, which is where we met.
Wow, magical.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I am so grateful you are in Austin, Texas. Allow me to meet you. And I don't know if you missed the intro. I literally think you are the coolest person here. So
Oh my goodness.
super honored and grateful. And wow, Deanna, really throughout the entire process, entire journey, you are such a visionary. You always see what is even before it's even manifest. And you're the one that leading all the vision become true, which is wonderful.
Well, let me thank you for that. I think one of the things that's worth noting, because there are a couple of things I'm uncomfortable with. People ask me on occasion, your career. I don't know what that means, right? Quite candidly, career for me is my body of work. I think of myself almost in the artistic sense, right? I have a body of work. I have a collection of experiences, as opposed to a career, which seems very sort of well thought out, step 1 to 2 to 3, right? Not at all. I really am an entrepreneur by nature, which is I see market opportunities. I gather the resources required. I form the teams. I go out and sort of take the mountain, if you will. That doesn't sound like a career to me. That sounds more like a series of engagements and as a result. So at the same time, this idea of being a visionary, which is what sent me on this tangent, the visionary part, I would admit that first and foremost, I don't think of myself as a visionary. What I think of myself is someone who's paying attention and listens well. And by paying attention, in the most recent decade, I watched for data signals. What are we seeing in the market around what's happening? And is that a trend? Is that a leading indicator? Is that something that is different from the last year or last 5 years, right? So being very data-centric, I can see trends. I can recognize patterns. That feels less visionary and more just paying attention, just listening, just, what have you. So when I have jumped off and launched things and or engaged in businesses or even invested in businesses in my current role, it's as much a conversation about what are the leading indicators? Why do we believe? And it gets back to that youth point I made earlier. I'm curious. Why do we believe that that's important? Why is that a leading indicator that you believe that this is going to happen? So I ask a lot of questions, and I ask questions of myself, and I ask questions of my entrepreneurs and people that I surround myself with. So it's less vision and more questions, more data. I've been very lucky in some cases because I've been right on time. And then other times I've been about 15 minutes early and sometimes about 15 minutes late. So the jury's out, if you will, around how visionary I am. But I am paying attention and I am listening and watching for those signals.
That's so beautiful said. I love that you just demystified what visionary really means.
Yeah.
It's not just someone who sit there dreaming about the world when one day the magic going to show up.
Right.
Instead, you look at the number, you make a decision, you go out there, make it happen. And I think that is such a beautiful explanation of what visionary truly means.
Okay. Well, then in that definition, I will accept your compliment.
You mentioned about you were an entrepreneur. Well, you always see yourself as an entrepreneur. I'm curious, do you always know that about you? Or when is the moment you realize, oh, wow, that's my superpower?
I think I always looked at business as opportunities to learn and reimagine. And
I love that word.
That's for me what entrepreneurialism is. I mean, sure, does it mean running or launching or building a small business? Absolutely. But if you look at even some of the largest businesses that we see on the stock market or privately held, they one day started as a small, imagined business. And they grew quite large, and they grew either through acquisition or they grew through product development or they grew through, parts unknown. But they all started with someone imagined a service or a product need and built something and then most likely tested and learned and so on and such. So the notion of being an entrepreneur is about being a person that recognizes and is flexible and agile and sort of engaged in business, testing and learning, paying attention to the signals, listening to the customers, and again, getting back to just has a great team. So entrepreneur, in my mind, feels like a agile, scrappy, hustling, disciplined business exec who sees market opportunities, right? As opposed to venture-funded, hoodie-wearing, technology-driven software, unicorn, right? Which is how the media businesses sort of made entrepreneurs look, right? I know a number of women in particular who, in the last 2 to 3 years during the pandemic, like yourself, launched businesses from their kitchens, right? Saw an opportunity, and what that to me is as entrepreneurial as the Bay Area, young male executive, white male young executive who got out of a university known as Stanford and is off building the next Facebook or what have you, right? No, entrepreneurialism is really about all of us and how it's an approach as opposed to a persona, right? It's like, what is our mindset? How do we think about businesses?
Do you think that's born ability or is a learned capability.
It's an absolute learned capability.
Mm.
I think even with the resilience, the agility, some of the attributes that I described earlier, those are all things you can learn.
Mm-hmm.
Do people spend the time learning it? Do we teach business executives,
Mm-hmm.
those skills? Not enough. But was I born with this and you weren't? No, absolutely not. Some of this was learned, some of this is inherent, but it can be learned.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you're an entrepreneur and you're not, right? That's not the case.
I love that. I think today the media world portray entrepreneur in such a certain look or feel or age or whatever that word is.
Yeah.
But I think you're absolutely right. I
Yeah.
love that you said about entrepreneurs about learning and reimagine.
Yeah.
Reimagine any type of businesses.
Yes.
And I think that is such a essence of what innovation truly means.
Yeah. Agreed.
And I'm curious, Deanna, for your own personal journey, you are launching and supporting so many amazing businesses along the way. Were you ever afraid? You were mentioned back then earlier that it's a lonely journey, right?
Yeah.
At that point, I think we're not always, are so lucky to have amazing supporting group that we are having today. Along the process of your own process, were you ever afraid of saying yes, jumping into something unknown?
I think fear can be healthy.
Mm.
And so the answer to the question is yes, I've been afraid. But I've also been in, dare I say, big corporate environments where fear was palpable, right? You could sense it in the culture, you could sense it in the leadership team. And so in those cases, there was fear. So I don't think fear is exclusive to entrepreneurialism. And I would say, honestly, I've been fearful, but I also am such an optimist and I get excited by opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious and I'm bold. And, those are things that sort of override, those few moments where you're like, should I be doing this? I think where we get hung up as a society, and which leads us to fear, is really tied to failure. This idea of failing.
Let's talk about that.
Yes, let's talk about that. I mean, people don't talk about failure enough, but they should.
So let's.
All right.
Let's be the change we want to see in the world.
Let's do it.
What might be maybe one of the biggest failure that you personally experiences, how that transformed you, become who you are today?
Yeah. So I would say that I have now seen 3, if not 4, market corrections. And each market correction has been a tremendous learning curve. And it's in those market corrections that I personally have been trying to raise capital, or I've been struggling with a business from a revenue perspective, or I've had employee concerns or problems at the time of these market corrections. And when you're high flying, when you've got a bank full of money you just raised at a reasonable valuation, when there's all these things going well, there's not a lot of fear, not a lot of anxiety. But when there's a market correction, societally wise, we all get fearful. And what's happening in a test and learn environment, in an agile environment, in the good days, is a lot of failure. But when you're trying to raise capital or you're sitting in front of an environment like a market correction like we have currently, you see fear and you see it across your investor LPs, you see it in your entrepreneur's eyes, and you stop failing. You stop testing and learning. And so for me personally, there was a number of businesses that I was able to secure an exit for during some of those market corrections, and yet it was premature of what I would have liked to have seen the business do, but it was time to land the plane, right? It was time to do that. So I learned in a number of those occasions to listen to the market signals again, but also to listen and watch for the fear, because any fear was going to create a condition which I like to refer to as a crisis in confidence. And when you have a crisis in confidence, whether it's at the board level, whether it's at the employee level, whether it's at the leadership level, people stop being open to testing and learning and to failure. So I have failed a couple of times, but I was able to land the plane and ultimately give back what was available to investors. There were positions where I wasn't as successful as I would like, and there was that crisis in confidence, and so we were asked to liquidate or give the asset or sell the asset. Those are the moments that are hard. There have been, in many of those corrections, layoffs of people. And my people management philosophy has always been, I work for you if we're aligned on what your personal goals and our business goals are. And when we're not successful, no fault of yours, or maybe not of mine, because it's a market correction, and I have to let you go, that's a really tough moment. Mm-hmm. It's tough emotionally. It's tough as a business executive because, again, this word failure will come up. I've failed you in some capacity, and that's difficult for me to message to you, but it's what I need to do because I need to obviously save the business at that point, because that's my fiduciary opportunity or obligation. So failure is tough when people are involved, when you have to lay people off. Failure is tough when you have to sell a company premature of its vision, of its opportunity. But I see it all the time. It happens in very micro ways, and I see it in very big ways. I don't think I've answered your question, but I think you understand the philosophy about it, which is I'm not afraid of failure. But failure does create a fearful environment. When you have a fearful environment, it's challenging to manage boards, investors, employees, but you just do the best you can.
So how would you, in those challenging environments, to keep going in the presence of crisis in confidence?
Well, it's interesting. I didn't mention this earlier around entrepreneurialism. One of my sort of skills in this context is this idea that I don't quit. And I think many of the great entrepreneurs don't quit, right? There's a fundamental belief that you need to explore every possible opportunity before letting go of something. So I'm somebody that has fueled and excited and keeps going because I believe that I'm just not going to quit.
Were you always this way?
Always.
That's so magical.
Well, I mean, it wasn't apparent until I had opportunities where I thought I should quit now. Mm-hmm. But no, I still to this day believe that I just won't quit. I won't give up.
I love that. What do you think is your superpower, Deanna? You come a long way. You see so many market correction. You let people go. You onboarding people. You have been through every possible situation, scenarios there exist on this planet. What do you think is your superpower to help you come this far?
I think by all those examples you just suggested, I'm old, which I am. I've lived through all the market corrections, all the tough economies. Superpowers, I think what I've been told about myself is that I listen very well. I actively pay attention and I listen. I listen to what you're saying. I listen to what you're not saying. I listen to how you're saying something, and I'm paying attention to you as much as the information you're sharing. And that allows me to manage the situation, to manage your contribution, my contribution, and sort of make sense of the conversation. And you could be a customer, you could be an employee, you could be a supervisor or a boss for me, you could be a board member, you could be an investor, you could be a friend or a colleague, right? Paying attention to you and listening is what people have said is something that I do well. But I think, again, when we talk about superpowers, I don't know. I would refute the visionary statement as much as I'm paying attention. Again, listening of a different sort, listening to market signals and what have you. I might come back to what we just said, which is I just won't quit, right?
I love that.
I just will keep going until we've exhausted ourselves.
I love that. So what I see is you are this quote-unquote visionary. You don't have to like it. Someone who are a master leader who noticing the number, the trend, the people, what lights you then up. I feel like you almost have this master conductor. You're like behind all the amazing instrument and you just observe what works, what doesn't, and you know what sounds come together in the most beautiful way. And you're the one that sit in your seat, being the leader seat, directing where go what. And when you have that vision, now you have the tenacity. So I think it's to want that vision plus the tenacity truly become that superpower, support you to achieve all the success you are today.
Well, I like the analogy in the sense that I use that analogy on occasion, which is that I am an orchestra conductor. But here's the nuance that I think is relevant. And I'm also very proud of this term. I'm an operator, right? So while I'm an entrepreneur, I'm also an operator. And when I use that orchestra analogy, I can say to the first chair string instrument person, I played that instrument before. So I am appreciative of how you play, the quality of the sound. But you need to trust me that your sound is part of a bigger sound. And that's one of those things that those relationships, those conversations with talent. And talent is so much a part of leadership and management, which is being able to say to someone, I've played your instrument before and I understand it. And when I was managing engineers very early on in my career, back in the late 90s at Condé Nast, I didn't write code. I didn't play their instrument. But I paid attention to how they did their jobs and what was fulfilling or rewarding for them so that I could say, look, I don't play your instrument, but I appreciate how you do it, and I'm paying attention to how you do it so that I can create the right environment for you to do this, right? So the orchestra conductor is a good one in terms of an analog. And being able to say to someone, I'm an operator, and being able to say to someone, I've done the work you're doing, and it's really difficult, and I understand that. Empathy, engagement. I think that's important in the now management or leadership or some of those things, because there are a lot of people with a lot of money out there willing to invest in companies. Not all of them, in fact, many of them have not operated businesses, have not played those instruments. So when you're talking to entrepreneurs, when you're talking to talent, when you're talking to people who have ideas, who want to imagine or reimagine a business, having credibility as an operator, I think, is important.
I want to share this one thought, and I thought maybe you'll appreciate this. I love everything you just shared. The way how I see it is, if I look at all the talents on the whole world, and I'm kind of generalizing it, which I don't like to do that, but there are ultimately 3 types of talents on this planet, and just play with me. First type, I call it visionary. He or she has this amazing vision. They can see something from nothing. He or she is someone like Bill Gates, someone like Elon Musk, can see something just so beyond everyone else can see. That's one type of person. Second type is, I call it operation geniuses. He or she If I say, hey, Deanna, let's go to the moon, you said, no problem when there are 3 steps. A, B, C, boom, we are in the moon. That person just able to see things in a very grounded way. And without this type of wonderful leader in the world, the house is not being built.
Yeah.
The car is not being driven. And we can't be here without those amazing people.
Yeah.
The second type. The last type is someone I call it people. He or she are just amazing at leadership, at seeing people, at recognizing what drives, what lights people up. And if you think about this 3 triangle, in any team, any environment, any friendship, any partnership, each and every one of us ultimately have one driving force. So maybe someone could be visionary, but their subcategory will be people, or operations. But in any given team, ideally you want to have those 3 energies present.
Yeah.
Someone say, okay, let's go to the moon. Wonderful. There are 3 steps. And then you got people leader, orchestra, the right people, right team, and share the vision with the whole world. So essentially that's almost like ultimate triangle. And as you share, I was like, oh my God, you just hit all 3 in the most magical way. And it's so beautiful.
Well, I would agree with your 3 types of people. And you also alluded to this, which I think is important. I think we all, hopefully, if we're successful or in success, we have all 3 of those elements.
We do.
Right? It is really a question of whether that is how you present yourself in the first moment, in first engagement, or is that something that comes out in you when you're further down a process or a road? Is that something that happens when you're stressed, or is that something that happens when you're feeling comfortable, right? And so how you lead is based on those 3 types of personalities. I would say I'm personally stronger probably in what you term as visionary, which I think is more imagination based on, some data signals. But I am the person that can tell you how to get from A to B to C to D. Well, I'm not the most detailed individual, so I like to hire people who are very detail-oriented. And then on the people side, I'm a bit of an introvert, which you know. But I don't have a problem walking into a large group of people as somebody leading business to have a very thoughtful conversation and be about and recognize what is happening to them is of them, and they're an extension of the idea, right? Without them, this idea means nothing, right? So I can be that people person. I can be that connector on the operations side, and I can obviously come up with some of the ideas. But I think we're all 3, and this is another area where I think people can develop skills, right? And their processes. But what it also brings up for me when I think about these things is how important hiring is as an entrepreneur.
So important. And I love what you said about, I feel like it's not about how, it's about who.
Yeah.
Because you're right, we all have 3 natural talents, but generally speaking, one of those elements are something that we naturally good at.
Right.
There's also secondary, but there's just one part is just, doesn't matter how hard I try, I would never able to make this beautiful wall as great as people made it.
Right.
So there's one part about, I believe it's not about how, it's about who.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, and that brings me to hiring, right? So one of the things I see as challenges for businesses that I either inherit to reimagine or that I'm investing in or that I sort of see in the market is culture, good culture and bad culture. And bad culture comes from a number of places, but sometimes bad culture is the results of bad hiring. And hiring is really critical for an entrepreneur to spend time thinking about. And it really is about complementing themselves, right? As opposed to hiring other versions of themselves, right? So in a world 15 years ago, the conversation was about if you're an engineer who thinks like an engineer does, don't hire a CFO or a head of sales or a head of people or a head of marketing that thinks like an engineer because you're like-minded, right? Because you get along, because those people are a half a step from you. They're part of your sort of circle. You're going to have to work a little harder. You want to find people who think differently than an engineer, and you want to have an open, transparent, and very engaging, week to week, day to day kind of thing with those people you hire. Many people 10, 15, 20 years ago would hire people that acted and looked and felt like themselves. We fast forward to the last 5 to 7 years. It's never been more apparent to everybody that not only do you not want to hire people that think like you need to even be more adamant and more disciplined about hiring people who don't look like you, who don't come from the same backgrounds. So it's one thing for an engineering lead who's a CEO to hire a bunch of engineering people that went to the same university they went to and they look the same and they're from the same town, basically. It's another thing to say, what do I really need around this table in terms of gender, sexual preference, race, geography, and again, how do they think, right? And so how people think was something we got smarter about as a society 15 years ago, 10 years ago. What we're starting to really understand is inclusion. What we're really starting to understand is to hire and find people who don't look like us, don't speak like us, don't come from the same backgrounds, don't come from the same universities, maybe don't go to university at all, right? And, really sort of, and dare I say, let women into the room, right? So it's like there's so much to do in that space. We're far from even a quarter way into that, to that understanding. So that, in my mind, is why I'm excited about not just investing in companies, but also, I'm likely to go off and launch a company.
Sky's the limit.
I mean, why not, right?
Why not?
I don't think you can be ever too old to be an entrepreneur.
No.
So,
no.
Yeah.
I think I love what you just said. I think that self-awareness is such a beautiful piece.
Yeah.
And knowing that who you are, knowing who else need to be surrounded on your table so we can really, I tell people, stronger together. I tell people as Asian that we're good at math. The math that we love to do is 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
I truly believe that when you bring the right people on the table, when I bring my full, authentic myself, when you do the same, 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
And that all coming from the self-awareness and the discernment, seeing the truth.
Yeah.
Because it will be comfortable to hire someone exactly like you, with exactly things like you, or have a, you all go golfing once a day, or whatever that might be.
Yeah. No, it's not lip service, and it's not even tokenism, right? It really is about, and you said it very eloquently as well, which is, that's another skill that we'll add to that entrepreneur list, right? Which is, are you self-aware to know not just what your success looks like and what fear looks like, but really, where are you strong in that triangle? Where are you strong from a skills perspective? Where are you strong or weak as a manager? And what are your limits? And, and sometimes, many times with entrepreneurs, they are rewarded with their focus, right? Their very tunnel visions focus, because that's what it takes to get a product or service to market, right? That's what it takes to raise capital. That's what it takes to do the checklist of things that you have to do when you're launching a business. What's challenging is that's not what a business needs ongoing. Leadership, broadly speaking, is ideally a group of people, but it's wide-angled lens to say what are things that we're considering, and getting those opinions and getting those insights as well from your leadership team is really how to drive forward, without it falling prey to sort of collective decision making, right? So there's a point where leaders stop leading and they just vote democratically, right? That's a small d, by the way. But that this idea that, people are all equal, that's not true. People have varying responsibilities, and therefore decision making needs to be owned in certain places. And regardless of title, by the way, the CEO doesn't make all the decisions. Ideally, the head of engineering makes the engineering decisions, and hopefully the CEO is making funding or people decisions. But candidly, it's this idea that listening and being open, and the lens being open wide to take in those discerning opinions is the responsibility of the decision maker. The decision maker should be a leader in that context. But it is an important part of entrepreneurialism.
I love that, Adam. And you touch base on success. I'm curious, Deanna, what's your definition for success? And for that, do you think you are successful?
Well, the success for me, historically, and I would actually even say currently, is tied to the ability to keep doing what we're doing until it's no longer viable or interesting. So if I think about companies and teams and what have you, there's so much around the imagining, the building, the growing, the evolving, etc., that is really dynamic. And it's only when the market evaporates or something changes materially outside of your control that business, that team, that environment is no longer viable, or you've stopped evolving and engaging and paid attention to where you should be going. So success is this ability to keep doing what you're doing, assuming that you're continuing to be dynamic and respond to market opportunities and to people. It's not much more than that, right? Fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not the entrepreneur that's been concerned about wealth as much as I've been concerned about what are the products and services and what are my opportunities in developing those products and services that is going to move society forward, right? I've never been someone who's been a part of a team who's built a product that doesn't serve society. I've been overly concerned about some of the trends in the world that are hurting society. But success is really this ability to keep doing what we want to do and make the world a better place.
I love that. Keep dreaming what you're dreaming about.
We'll keep dreaming about it for sure.
So what drives you today? You talk about success and all about keep doing what excites you at the moment. What drives you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about opportunity for women. Now, granted, we all know the statistics, especially in venture capital. We're still sitting around 2.5% of women are getting funded. We had a banner year in 21, it looks like. 22, we've kind of pulled back a bit, unfortunately. So there's a lot of room to grow in that space. But I feel like it's a conversation that's happening, right? And it wasn't happening 5 years ago. I think mixed leadership teams and bringing in different voices and different nationalities and different and more women and more diversity around people is also a conversation that's happening. That's not about venture funding at this point. Now it's about just businesses. Are we really paying attention? Are we letting the right people lead? I'm starting to see some of that. I would be, I'd have to be honest to say I'm still not seeing enough of that. And I would like to see in business in general, outside of venture, I'd like to see a lot more women running businesses. I'd love to see a lot more women on boards and the like. So, startups, women, mixed founder teams, great. We're making progress. We have a lot of room. Businesses that are existing, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, private equity, growth-driven companies, we need a lot more engagement from diverse leaders as well as women there. And then I think in the big markets and governments and other institutions, again, I subscribe to the fact that there has been a demographic that has led the last 20 or 30 years of business and has provided us with some opportunities, but I think we're far from where we need to be as a society, and I think that it's time for women to step up and engage at those levels because it's our turn. It's our time.
It's our time. Wow, so beautiful. I love that you're just so laser focused and so passionate about people.
Yeah.
I can tell that's one of your core values, what is supporting female founder or just diverse voices, diverse leadership. And I think you're right. It is our time. I really believe that when we all come together, when we all win together, it is a win-win-win world for everybody.
Yes, absolutely.
So tell us more about you today, Deanna. What are you up to today? And tell us more.
Yeah, so you and I met when I first moved to Austin.
Magical time.
Almost a year ago. And what has happened in the last year has been really enlightening in terms of the South by Southwest organization is where I sit with partnership with Penske Media around a venture fund. And in that last year, we've invested in 9 companies. And we've all, interestingly enough, diverse founders, which is exciting, and or minorities who've been without funding is a part of the mix. But we've also looked at 470 companies, and that was a lot of exciting opportunities, but a lot of hours really sort of understanding what does modern day entrepreneurialism look like. And so we're excited going into this next year and next cycle with the festival to continue to invest in companies. And our thesis is not just to invest in the 48 hours of the Pitch Fest, which is part of South by's history, but to really get to know companies and through the alumni network, through the advisory networks that South by has, to really see and discover talent along the way. What I have in the last 6 months also been very much passionate about is, candidly, is bringing women's professional soccer to Austin, Texas. So soccer, football, as they say in England. And it's led me to a really interesting path around women's sports, and it's something I'm personally investing in, and think that there's a big opportunity for women in sports in the next 5 to 10 years. So stay tuned on that. But I think that my relationship with South by will continue and go forward. But I think I'm going to spend a fair amount of my waking hours thinking about football here in Austin.
Wow, so exciting.
Yeah.
You never cease to amaze me, Deanna. That's exciting. And wow, congratulations. And do you only looking for early stage? What kind of founder are you looking for that he or she maybe can come to your way with that?
Yes. The thesis for the South by Southwest Innovators Fund is early stage, pre-seed and seed, global investments where there is a talented team and an addressable market.
Beautiful.
That is sizable and global in scale, where technology can be an accelerant or a disruptor. And we have expertise in our advisory network around 8 different sectors, which includes media and Web3, of course, but it also includes, direct-to-consumer, climate tech, ed tech, sports tech, food tech, a number of areas that future cities, future workplace, a number of areas that South by sort of has expertise. So it's broad and it's wide. It's focused on team and TAM. It's pre-seed and seed. It's small check. But we also believe that our value is more than capital. It's community. And we think that should advantage us. But most importantly, we're here in Austin, Texas, and we're co-investors. So we also look to support an ecosystem of venture capitalists and high net worth individuals and even small funds. We look to support them with co-investing as well.
That's exciting. And just technically, how do you define C and early, like pre-seed? I know it's a very large...
Yeah. So pre-seed, what I've witnessed in the last few months, if not year, is pre-seed to us is either first institutional money.
Got it.
Outside of angels and friends and family.
Okay.
So friends and family and angels may come to us with a note, a convertible note or a safe.
Got it.
And that's usually the first check is pre-seed. Seed is usually the round where they are on a path to product market fit and they're on a path, they understand their customers, and yet they haven't had a chance to demonstrate product market fit or customer or go to market.
I love that. So much possibilities.
Oh, yes.
Wow. Amazing. Well, Deanna, you also mentioned that one day you might start a product yourself or company yourself. Do you have any ideas?
I think it's likely to be in the women's sports space.
I can totally see that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You're going to really be the change you want to see in the world.
Absolutely.
And making the world a better place one day at a time.
Absolutely.
That's so amazing, Deanna. And thank you.
Of course.
You have personally, whether it's invest or advice or, supporting founders, across all the segments, all the sectors. And I'm curious, what are the top, maybe like one or two mistakes you see founder made that he or she can really avoid?
Okay. So I think we spoke a little bit about this, but I think the advice around things to avoid is in the hiring space.
People.
Is to really in the people space. Make sure you're hiring people who are complementary, be discerning. Don't hire too quickly. Hire, don't go outside your network when you hire. Really do the work to find the right mix of people to share your company and your vision with. And then I think secondarily, I would, it sounds like a cliche, but I wouldn't hesitate to explore a lot of opportunities until you find the right one, which means in translation that you will in fact fail a fair amount and not be afraid of that. Because a failure, an opportunity is an opportunity to learn. Right? Whereas in success, many times we're just on to the next thing. And I have met some really talented business executives who have, in success, asked the questions, why are we successful? And what are we doing correctly? That is the way to think about success because, again, it's going to enable you to continue doing what you're doing. But make sure that in failure, in success, regardless, you're asking the questions why. You're looking deep into what are the circumstances of this happening and is it repeatable and then is it sustainable? Because it's really, dare I say, not about the numbers. It's really about the why. It's, which is also obviously people have done a good job with explaining that.
I love that. Seeing the truth. Seeing what works, what doesn't work, and why is that?
Yeah.
And you talk about the why, Deanna. What is your why?
My why, I think, goes back to just being curious and ultimately constantly wanting to learn and to really be a part, belong to a community, belong to a team, belong to an organization, a city, a market, and getting to do what I like to do each day.
I love that. My last question to you is,
yes,
Deanna, One day, we all long cease exist. What do you want your gravestone to say about you?
Let's see. First off, I'm not sure I will have a plot. I think I'll be likely scattered someplace.
I want to be in the
Ashes.
ocean.
Yes.
Yes.
So, but if you think about reputationally for what you're asking, I think, if I look back, I'd like to be the person that listened and learned and loved, right?
Aw.
And I think the loving is, yeah, sure, I love a good idea. I love a good win, what have you. But I really enjoy and appreciate and love the journey, as opposed to that thing, right, over there. So I want to be known for listening and learning and also, but enjoying in that wealth of excitement that happens by being successful.
So beautiful. Listened, learned, and loved.
Yeah.
Wow. Deanna, once again, you never cease to amaze me. That's such a beautiful 3 words, truly summarize who you are as a leader, as a visionary that you are today. And I can definitely see how you, amongst all the amazing success, come to this point. So truly, thank you and thank you. Saying yes to me a year ago when we met first time in Austin, Texas. Say yes to me today to be this amazing, amazing journey with us and also share your wonderful story. So thank you so much, Deanna.
Well, thank you. All
Well,
right.
thank you everybody for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. I cannot wait to see you all next week. Bye, guys.